Hey, it's Fox from InfernoFox Gaming. The Castlevania series has some of the greatest music in video games, which I believe can be attributed to many thematic connections to the heavy metal music genre. Oh man, this one is going to get demonetized quickly because of some of the music that you're going to hear. I'm not in it for the money, of course. I'm a small channel, as evidenced here. Of course, if you get the chance, make sure you click like, you subscribe, ring the bell, all that sort of bo jazz. And I'll make sure to put in the description below all of the music that you hear, because I do want to support all of the artists, whether they are Castlevania or excellent heavy metal ones. One note about my own experience with the Castlevania series: I've kept myself grounded to only the Classicvania and Igavania games, so this is pretty much just going to mirror those types of games in the series. So that said, this discussion is going to pretty much just mirror those types of games here, though these entries often have the less is more sort of styling, especially when it comes to the 8-bit chiptune goodness. And while this music is fantastic in of itself, it also seems to have a lot in common with an absolutely fantastic music genre, heavy metal. And while this music is fantastic in of itself, it does have a lot in common with a number of classical, baroque, and heavy metal themings. Now, I've done some research online and I couldn't find anything where the various composers of the music for the Classicvania entries where they've stated they were directly inspired by heavy metal music. Now, when we start talking about the venerable composer Michiru Yamane, whom composed Bloodlines, Symphony of the Night, and nearly the rest of the Igavania games, she did say that she has been inspired by bands like Dream Theater. That said, there's a number of aspects that correlate this with Castlevania overall. Now, there's a thematic and tonal overlap. Heavy metal, especially in its classic and power metal forms, thrive on dark, gothic, supernatural themes, which of course is exactly the same territory that Castlevania inhabits. Some of the classic heavy metal album covers often depict castles, monsters, apocalyptic landscapes, which we know encapsulates a number of environments within the many games in Castlevania. Both Castlevania and heavy metal revel in melodrama, larger-than-life heroes, and a battle against ancient evil. The game's central aesthetic, vampires, grim medieval fortresses, and relentless nightscapes, mirror the moods set by metal bands like Iron Maiden, Black Sabbath, and Dio. Even the idea of a lone warrior storming Dracula's castle feels like a metal album concept brought to life. Another aspect would be musical composition techniques. With the start of the series in the 8-bit NES era and onward, Castlevania composers have consistently used musical devices common in heavy metal. We often hear fast driving rhythms that mimic galloping guitar riffs, such as those in Vampire Killer, harmonized lead lines reminiscent of Iron Maiden-style twin guitars, like in Bloody Tears and Castlevania 2, and frequent use of harmonic minor and Phrygian dominant scales to create an exotic, sinister feel, which is a hallmark of metal guitar soloing. Even on limited sound hardware, these tracks simulate the layered distortion, rapid picking, and aggressive attack of a metal arrangement. When the hardware improved in the SNES and Genesis era, the compositions became even more ambitious, incorporating keyboard runs, punchy bass lines, and arrangements that could easily be transcribed for a metal band. When the series transitioned into the Game Boy Advance and DS Metroidvania entries, the metal DNA persisted. Tracks that best match the tempos, neoclassical motifs, and layered harmonies include the likes of Castle Corridor from Aria of Sorrow. And while that has soaring lead lines with strong melodic hooks, Into the Dark Night from Dawn of Sorrow has a number of racing arpeggio straight out of a power metal playbook. Now, while I'm focusing my love on the most sorrowful games here, I do have to mention Heart of Fire, which rocks galloping rhythm, harmonic minor scales, and dual melodic lines, much like our two titular heroes dueling it out underneath the moon's light. God, I don't care this is a remix and a combination of two different songs from two different Castlevania themes. It just fits here. And if you've watched my channel before, you know I have such a high amount of love for this theme. Now, let's focus on some specific themes from the series for a moment, because there's a lot of metal to be had in a number of these tracks. Let's focus first on Vampire Killer from the original Castlevania. As the very first stage theme in the series, Vampire Killer sets the tone with its driving rhythm, a staple of classic metal bands like Iron Maiden and Judas Priest. The lead melody follows an arpeggiated structure reminiscent of power metal riffs, and the minor key progression gives it that storming the castle urgency. And even on NES sound hardware, the percussion channels the relentless double time of a drummer keeping up with high-speed rhythm guitars. It's short, it's punchy, and it's designed to energize the player, much like an opening track on a metal album. And some songs that could match the mood perhaps would be like Iron Maiden Aces High, because that has fast galloping rhythm, a heroic lead melody, and a minor key drive. As well as Judas Priest's Freewheel Burning, relentless tempo and shredding riffs, much like the song's running momentum. And while that theme is iconic, another that's oft featured in nearly every future Castlevania game, either as a remix or even just in like the sound test, is Bloody Tears from Castlevania II: Simon's Quest. And this has got to be the most power metal of the bunch. Its ascending intro motif feels like a soaring guitar lead, almost begging for harmonized dual guitar treatment. The melodic contour uses the harmonic minor scale, giving it an exotic and dramatic flair, a technique common in metal soloing. The piece also has a kind of anthemic quality. You could easily imagine a crowd chanting along, a concert, fists in the air with this. This track's sense of forward momentum, paired with its emotional urgency, is exactly the kind of emotional storytelling you find in bands like Halloween or Stratovarius. It also is one to keep us chugging forward through outdoor Transylvania, hoping to avoid a horrible night that has a curse. And some songs to match this mood are Yngwie Malmsteen's Black Star, which has an instrumental neoclassical shred directly echoing Castlevania's arpeggiated grandeur, with the guitar solo having some riffs that even sound like the first few notes of the song. And of course, Iron Maiden again with Phantom of the Opera. You got rapid tempo changes, a haunting melody, gothic gallop, and it just very close in feel. How about a not-so-iconic song from this specific game? Let's talk about the Dwelling of Doom from Castlevania II: Simon's Quest. Unlike the triumphant lift of Bloody Tears, Dwelling of Doom traps you in a relentless, haunting groove. The lead line snakes up and down in short, jagged patterns, creating a sense of paranoia rather than soaring grandeur. It gives the piece a mix of gothic atmosphere and raw speed, as it's less about an anthem and more about tension, which matches perfectly with a number of annoying enemy placements, false floors, and spike-filled death traps. Songs to match the mood, it would be Yngwie Malmsteen's Far Beyond the Sun. It's got neoclassical shred with rapid scalar runs and arpeggios, beginning riffs that sound somewhat familiar to Dwelling of Doom. And of course, there is the classic, the iconic Simon's theme from Super Castlevania IV. This really takes advantage of the SNES's richer sound palette to mimic a full band, though leading with strong organ tones. The bass line rocks into a tight groove, much like a metal rhythm section holding down the foundation under flashy guitar work. The melody alternates between rapid-fire note runs and big sweeping phrases, almost like alternating between guitar shredding and a chorus hook. The fuller percussion sound here makes the track feel more like a live performance, with heavy snares and cymbals evoking a metal drummer's stage presence. This theme perfectly encapsulates a battle of the ages between good and ultimate evil. Some songs that help to have the same feeling is Sabotage's Hall of the Mountain King. It's got tight rhythmic lock between bass and drums with a theatrical flair, and Manowar's Battle Hymn. Medieval, triumphant, almost sounds like a Belmont charging into Dracula's castle. The most obvious bridge to Castlevania and heavy metal, of course, are fan-made metal remixes. Oh my gosh, these are amazing. And some of my favorite artists are Gametal, Richard EB, and Toxic X Eternity. I'll include links to their YouTube channels in the description below, so please make sure you check them out, follow their links to their Bandcamps and Patreons and everything. It's really important to support fan-made and creative music that's not AI. And as mentioned earlier, many of the original songs that have that, metal DNA built within them, what these YouTube musicians are able to do is revoice their tracks with modern instruments like distortion guitars, double kicks, layered synths, and really giving the compositions that the compositions were almost begging for in the first place within their original 8-bit and 16-bit forms. But they go beyond this by mirroring the original's pacing while also making it feel like a full band performance and throwing in their own unique branding and guitar solos. This preserves the spirit of the track as game music while still delivering the adrenaline rush of a live metal piece. And hey, they just get it. Gametal, for example, adds his own guitar instrumentation along with organ flourishes and dark harmonies, preserving the vampiric theatricality of the series. He, just like the others I've mentioned, often had grown up playing the series, so they do well to channel nostalgia, reverence, and love for this series. While heavy metal is a big part of Castlevania's musical DNA, the Classicvania and Igavania era soundtracks pull from a surprisingly wide palette of genres. Many tracks mix styles in ways that make them hard to pin down to one influence, which partly is why the music stands out so much. And some of the other key musical influences beyond heavy metal would be Baroque and classical music, of course. Many Castlevania pieces borrow harmonic progressions, ornamentation, and counterpoint straight from Baroque composers like Bach and Vivaldi. The harpsichord-like synth sounds and elaborate melodic runs in tracks like Dance of Pails from Symphony of the Night or Clockwork from the third NES entry are textbook Baroque. Symphony of the Night especially leans into neoclassical composition, blending this with modern rock and instrumentation. Another genre, jazz and fusion, is seen. Several tracks, especially in the Game Boy Advance and DS era, feature, jazzy chord voicings, syncopated rhythms, and walking bass lines. Michiru Yamane's work on Symphony of the Night, Aria of Sorrow, and Portrait of Ruin often slips into lounge, jazz, or funk interludes. From the original Castlevania, we see Wicked Child have rhythmic quirks and chord changes reminiscent of jazz fusion. Another genre, progressive rock and prog metal, have complex time signatures, sudden tempo shifts, and layered arrangements pointing these Castlevania tracks to some prog influences. Songs like Awake from Circle of the Moon and Dance of Gold from Symphony of the Night feel like something that could be on Dream Theater or Emerson, Lake and Palmer album. Gothic rock and darkwave is another genre, and the moodier castle themes pull from this sort of brooding atmosphere and dark minor key melodies. There's a kinship, really, with bands like Sisters of Mercy or The Cure in some slower organ-heavy tracks. And finally, film scores from horror and adventure movies and is another genre, and this is pretty obvious, of course, with the ending of the original Castlevania being a literal nod to old-school horror movies. We hear nods to Hammer Studio horror soundtracks and Bernard Herrmann-style suspense writing. The layering of strings, choirs, and pipe organs create a cinematic tension similar to old vampire films. The music of the Castlevania series is nothing short of extraordinary. Its staying power comes from a deep musical DNA, drawing heavily from the metal of its era and the neoclassical traditions that inspired it. But that's only part of the story. As woven throughout are threads of gothic film scores, prog rock, and even classical orchestral themes. These influences don't just give Castlevania its unique identity, they also open doors for us as players, pulling us into these worlds we might not have ever explored otherwise. And guys, were there any other influences to the Castlevania series that maybe I missed with the music? Let me know in the comments section below, as well as your thoughts about the soundtracks to Castlevania. And make sure you check out those YouTube channels I mentioned, Gametal, Toxic X Eternity, Richard EB, as well as all of the regular metal artists that I've mentioned too.
But Maria, you're too young for this. You just let the big hunter here take care of that bad man, okay?
Oh, you don't know anything. I can handle this just fine.